The following preview has been rated bad by the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast. Please check out our full episode when it releases on Sunday. Foolish mortals beware. You have been invited to start the spooky season early with yet another Disney movie to be reviewed by the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast. Go beyond the famous ride and take a ride with us as Eddie Murphy endlessly drops one-liners while his family does stuff in historic Gracie Manor as Nicho and Chris review The Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, that's the whole movie, really.
Yeah. No, this,
It's just Eddie Murphy's one-liners and, like, hey, do you remember from the ride that you've ridden one time, this one part, but not this other part that you do remember?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, I don't have the nostalgia going into this movie or the emotional ties to it like you did.
Sure.
I went into this blind knowing that a lot of people kind of panned this movie. I didn't really watch it growing up because, again, not a Disney kid. But I was not... I was expecting it to be like, okay, it's a kid's movie, but I was not expecting it to be this bad.
Yeah. I went into this being a lover of theme parks in general, and Disney's rides in particular, and their Imagineers have always done impressive work. Haunted Mansion's a great example of that work. And this movie doesn't do any of that justice. There's no effort put into, like, the technology that was put into the ride. There's no effort put into the story that was put into the ride. There's a ton of lore and background, like, fan theories and guesses that they could have played off of, that they just went with the most basic one.
Yeah, that's a good point. It feels like a very generic horror film that's not even trying to be interesting. It's just like, hey, we're at a spooky mansion, there's ghosts, there's zombies, there's spiders, there's a floating orb head, and there's a floating orb.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of disappointing is, like, all of the quote-unquote humans, so, like, the wife, the kids, Eddie Murphy's character, they don't really have anything, like, going for them. The only thing that's, like, outstanding is, like, Eddie Murphy is Eddie Murphy, which is disappointing.
And even that's exactly, it's disappointing. It's not even, like...
Because even, okay, yeah, this movie came out in 2003, and, like, it is expected Eddie Murphy to have quirky one-liners and to have, like, some over-the-top humor. But we also knew at this time that he could act very well. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, they wanted him to lean so hard into the one-liners that, like, you forget that this character's name is Jim.
Yeah. I mean, hell, you don't even remember most of the characters' names because they're said, like, once or twice besides, like, Lord Gracie.
Yeah, which honestly might be the best character in this.
And even then, like...
And, like, that's a weak go.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that, like, not only are the characters weak, but there's not really, like, conflict. It's just like, okay, here's this one thing. Well, to do this thing, you got to go through 20 different things to get to this one thing that doesn't really change too much.
Yeah, it's an interesting, like, look into the failure of Disney, because, like, we've talked about how anime live-action remakes have some very good versions, but a lot of bad ones.
Yes.
And we've talked about the same thing with video game adaptations, or even board game adaptations, where, like, there's maybe one or two that are, like, really stellar, but most of them are just terrible flops. Some of them amusing flops. This, unfortunately, is in the terrible flop of the live-action ride into movie category.
Yeah, it's... I don't know, there's just... For me... There's just so much random stuff stitched together that it just doesn't work.
No.
And it just, there's
like a flow to the ride that this movie just doesn't have. It kind of like jumps, like it's all in one spot too. Like there's not like a ton of change of venue, and yet the movie jumps and like snaps hard from one room to the next.
Yeah, and even then, like, we talk a little bit about the architecture, and that's the sad thing is, like, there's not much to talk about because there's, like, maybe 4 sets. You have the exterior, you have the interior, or you have the main hallway, and you have the library for the most part. Other than that, they're kind of nondescript rooms that are kind of fancy, but not interesting.
Which is honestly disappointing, because clearly someone who was working on this, like, really put a lot of effort in. Because there's a lot of scenes of the outside of the mansion or, like, specific areas of the mansion that are really cool. And, like, there's plenty of good costume designing, especially with some of the zombies. They look good and spooky. But it's all overshadowed by terrible dialogue.
Yeah, exactly.
And, like, more so than, like, the normal Disney Channel movie-styled bad dialogue.
Yeah, and zero character growth at all. Like, the only thing we get is,
I would argue backwards character growth. The wife learns that her husband doesn't really care much about her, but, like, that's okay, because she's not married to a ghost. And the kids have no character to growth, and Eddie Murphy's character says that he's learned the value of family, and then immediately looks like he hates himself.
Well, and he also doesn't really give up anything for that. He just does a thing that doesn't really translate to, like, well, here's the deed to this entire mansion.
Yeah, no,
do with it what you will. I don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah, it's not even like he has to sacrifice anything to, like, learn about family. Like, no one's hurt, no one dies, and he gets the thing he wanted at the end. Which wasn't family time, it was the deed to this house.
But hey, the deed to the house could lead to just more family time. He doesn't have to be hunting another house for a while.
See, you say that, but, like, the movie very clearly states that, like, he has a nice house that he already lives in. They're not looking to move themselves, he's a realtor. He's gonna sell this immediately.
Yeah, that's the shitty thing, because honestly, I would totally keep the house.
Oh, me too. We would be moving straight in.
Hell yeah.
We would be starting our company's first New Orleans section of the firm. I would immediately have balls. Yes.
I would have so many sets to shoot garbage movies.
Yes. Immediately, like, I would be moving in and happy as a clam, but, like, it's very clear that, like, this isn't Eddie Murphy's family's style.
No.
None of the characters seem to be interested in, like, actually being at this house, despite all of them wanting to go, minus the kids, who don't seem to have any wants or desires themselves.
Yeah, it's just a bad movie all around. I don't think I have anything that I can say to really redeem it, you know?
Which is disappointing, because it could have been really cool. There's plenty of, like, little, like, snips that you're like, okay, if we had leaned into that could have been cool. Like, if we had leaned more into the campiness of the maid and the butler, we could have had something more like Clue, and that could have been cool.
Yeah.
Or if we had leaned the other way and, like, gone more with what the mom and the ghost husband are talking about, like, that could have been, like, a cool, spooky romance. But instead, we're following
Eddie Murphy around for the most part.
Which is disappointing, because, like, we've seen him do good work with Disney before, and we liked it. We've seen him do good work on his own before, and this one wasn't it.
Yeah.
I don't know where the direction went wrong, but
I think it goes back to our talks about, like, video game movie adaptations of just
they tried to put too much in.
Yeah, it's trying to do too much over a course of an hour and a half, and saying, "Look, we did the thing."
That's true. And the other thing that's really nice about the ride is, like, it's vague in the fact that it's, like, haunted mansion. Anything is possible in the haunted mansion, and yet in the movie, some stuff's possible and other stuff's not.
Yeah.
And they never really explain the magic/ghost system, which is kind of disappointing, because there's some pretty cool ghosts. Would have been interested in more fire dragons.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just one of those passable movies, so...
Very, very. But we do talk a lot about how we think we could have improved it.
Yes.
Where they went wrong, and whether or not you should go ride the ride.
Yeah, just a bit, so.
Yeah.
But, anyway, this has been the Good, the Bad, with the Weird previews.
Check out the full episode.
Peace!